ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. I would like to talk to you about the causes and consequences of the Great Depression, continuing our Capitalism series. And I'm going to be taking a little bit of information from this lecture by the same name, The Causes and Consequences of the Great Depression by Richard M. Saltzman. Now, I was alerted to the existence of this lecture. I mean, I had seen it on the Ayn Rand Institute website before, but I never bought it until recently. Horvey said to me, you know, because of my Capitalism series, he says, he sends a private message, I think, about it. He said, Saltzman finds a few different reasons for the Great Depression than most people do, and he mentioned some of them. So I thought, oh, I better get hold of that. Interestingly, I had this in my mailbox before the purchase had even cleared on the bank account. It's a really excellent piece of work here, and we're going to be looking at some of the clues that he gives us and some leads that I found in material that I have on my shelves. And I'd like to give a big thank you to Horvey for my most recent contribution. I hope that it's appropriate to be thanking contributors. In the future, I plan to do so unless it's specified that they don't want to be thanked. So thank you, Horvey, for dedicating a recent contribution to the Capitalism series. So let us continue with that. Now, I'm not going to tell you all of the things that Mr. Saltzman comes up with as the causes of the Great Depression. As I'm not going to tell you all of the stuff that he has here. You have to purchase it on your own, of course. But I am going to tell you one or two things that will tantalize you. Some things that are very interesting that are outside the standard definition. For example, he says that stock prices cannot be overpriced. He says that all of the gains in the stock market in the 1920s were perfectly reasonable. Market gains not to be blemished. That's Saltzman. Now, anyone who knows the standard interpretation of the Great Depression knows that that's not the standard interpretation. So the standard interpretation of the Great Depression it includes quite a bit of stuff we're going to be getting from a couple books in just a moment here. First, I want to read you something that I happened upon. This is sort of an unabashed praise of capitalism. And let me read to you a little bit first, and then we'll tell you about it, because I don't want to spoil with the context. This is a section titled The Steamboat, the Railroad, and the Telegraph. Soon after 1800, certain changes began in ways of travel that have made life different from that of our forefathers. We have seen in previous chapters that travel in old times was very slow. Men jogged along day after day, week after week to make a journey of hundreds of miles on horseback, or they were jolted over bad roads in stage wagons or carriages. Pack horses or heavy wagons carried all the freight that went by land. Boats, rowed or pushed with poles, went slowly up and down the rivers carrying passengers and freights. Perigours with our oars and sails and other small vessels plied up and down the coast, and all the ships at sea were propelled by sails. In ships, our people made great improvements. The Baltimore Clipper, a schooner with raking masts, that is, masts that slanted backward, was famous for its speed. Our frigates gained advantages in the War of 1812 by being better sailors than the English men of war. At a later period, the American clipper-built ships were the swiftest sailing vessels in the world. This superiority in building and sailing swift ships has remained with America to the present time, as recent yacht races have shown. Now, it's unabashedly saying, look at the progress and look how good we are at things. Recent yacht races have shown America is ascendant in world technology of sailing, and has been ever since the War of 1812. We've been better sailors than the Brits, it says. It's published in 1888, fantastic little book called A History of the United States and Its People by Edward Eggleston, republished by Lost Classics Book Company. Lost Classics Book Company. Now this goes on for another page and a half, 2 pages here, and we're going to indulge because it's just fantastic. It gets better. So far as about the boats thing's a little abstract because we're not into that. We don't know too much about masts or raked masts anymore. But continuing, after the invention of the steam engine in England, attempts were made in France, Scotland, and America to build boats that would go by steam. But Robert Fulton, an American, built the first really successful steamboat. She was launched in 1807 and ran between New York and Albany, to the great wonder of all who saw her. Steamboats soon after took the place of keelboats, and they greatly aided in the rapid development of the new country. Steamboats served for commerce and travel where there were rivers and lakes. But how should the traffic on the western rivers and the Great Lakes be connected with the rivers east of the Allegheny Mountains and the sea? Canals, long used in Europe, were thought of for this purpose, and Washington was much interested in a proposed canal from the Potomac to the Ohio River. But the first great canal in this country was that from the Hudson River to Lake Erie. The chief promoter of this work was Dewitt Clinton, D-E space W-I-T-T, Clinton, governor of New York. It was 8 years in construction. It was begun on the 4th of July, of course, 1817, and in 1825 its completion was celebrated by a procession of boats from Lake Erie to the ocean, where Governor Dewitt Clinton poured a keg of Lake Erie water into the sea as a sign of their union. This canal, by opening a trade with the West, made New York the greatest city of the United States. But for the more mountainous country of the Middle States, the great national road for wagons was planned and built from western Maryland as far as the western part of Indiana. The extension of railroads soon rendered it of no importance as a national work. The national road was finished when, 1819 or something like that, or 1812 or something. It doesn't say here. I know it off the top of my head. It was early there. And railroads come in 1825 and 1830. So, but it just goes to show the government was tied up in large-scale infrastructure from the beginning. Continuing, the greatest change of all in the life of Americans was made by the railway, which was introduced from England. The first railroads were merely tracks of iron bars on which little cars loaded with coal were drawn from the mines. Now, I just interject here briefly. At first, when they were doing railroads, they were just drawn by horses, and when they figured out they're going to put some power in this, have an engine, because they had steam engines, but they were 4 stories tall, and they were getting smaller and smaller and better, and eventually they'd try to put one on something that would move itself down the tracks. First of all, they were too heavy and they were splitting the tracks. The tracks weren't for things that heavy. But second of all, they weren't sure. They didn't conceive of the fact that you could just have those smooth wheels driven. We think of a train and it's just normal. But they thought they're going to have some sort of cogged mechanism in the middle of the track with teeth for the machine to push by, and the wheels it'll just roll on. So they spent a lot of time in the early years working on systems that were just later, they just said, well, let's just have the smooth wheels be driven. And it took time to get the engines to be heavier and heavier so they were useful with a good load of cars. They had to be a good heavy engine to get traction. But anyways, that wasn't obvious at first, and it's a lesson we might do well to remember just for the heck of it. The first railway in the United States was about 2 miles long and was used only for hauling stone. The cars were drawn by horses. The first passenger train in America was run on the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad in 1830, but the cars were drawn by horse the first year. The extension of railways was very rapid. They changed America more than any other country. Now, you might pause and say, why did America get railroads going to every county and every town in every county and every coal mine in every town? Why did we have so many rail lines going all over the place? One of the answers is over government investment. The government poured money into the railroads in various ways, subsidies and so forth, that unnaturally led to massive booms in railroad expansion that were unsustainable. But, leaving that point aside,